Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast, Mayday, what's your location? Get the panel out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, I need water in that 2.5-inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5-inch line. To the rope, to the rope, to the rope! 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear!
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we talk about firefighter line of duty deaths to try to learn from these tragic events. This week, I'm joined by my very frequent co-host, Denis, who's down in beautiful, sunny Nova Scotia. Going to join us to talk about this week's event, which occurs in St. Louis, Missouri in 2002. But before we get into that, we've been doing these FDNY tips. Before we get into that, we'll go, hello, Denis, how's it going?
Hey, Paul. Interesting week. It's 2 years to the day this week since the devastating fires that rolled through this portion of Halifax Regional Municipality and burned 151 homes and displaced some 17,000 people who all evacuated down a single 2-lane road with fire burning around them. And well, I shouldn't say they all evacuated. Some of them went through the woods on ATV trails, and some of them went through hydro power easements to get out in time. There was some severe issues with communications and interoperability between police, fire, and provincial fire fighting forces, who are mostly responsible for the wildland fires themselves. So there was just a mess. And this week, on the anniversary of the date, the province issued a very short email just saying there will be nobody charged in this event due to lack of sufficient evidence. And that was it. That was the entire extent of the email. And on that same day, again on that anniversary day, we hit 30 degrees in some areas of the province. It's been quite cool. And the humidity dropped to 12%, and it was blowing about 30 kilometers an hour on that day. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people who experienced this event firsthand had a horrible sense of deja vu.
Right.
And right now, as I speak, there are actually a couple fires burning in the province, whereby some people clearly didn't get the new $25,000 fine message that if you don't have enough sense not to burn when it's clearly unsafe to burn and the province is telling you not to burn, the only way left is to talk to your wallet.
Yeah, no kidding. Is there a report out on that fire yet, the Tantalon fires? That
There's a number of reports. The DNR, which is the Department of Natural Resources, they did a contractor, a consultant, do a report, and the city's emergency management office did a report. We think there was a report done by the fire department, but it was never made public. And the two reports that were done, I think only the emergency measures report really took accountability for some of the issues. The DNR report, in my mind, was kind of looked at the sunny side of things,
right.
and failed to get too very deeply into what the issues were, despite the fact that the public and was extremely willing to tell them what the issues were. We're not entirely sure that that the listening was genuine or even comprehensive enough. So there's these are challenges, right? You know, communications between agencies, particularly agencies of government at many levels, really, and the public who actually experiences it. I mean, I was an emergency responder and manager for almost 40 years, 39 years. And even going through this wildfire myself, I mean, my property was burned out, damage to my home, although my home still stands. It changes your perspective somewhat on how to view these incidents from the side of how of the I don't want to use the word victim because that's not the right word, but as the person who suffered loss and was affected by it. I mean, I was evacuated for 2 weeks. It was over a week before I knew whether my house even stood or not. There was just no communications on that at all. In fact, people who had lost their homes were put on a bus and taken around. They weren't allowed to get off, taken around to show that their homes were gone. And that's how I found out that my house was standing, because one of my neighbors filmed my house and told me,
Oh,
who
wow.
lost his, by the way, filmed
Huh.
my house and told me, yes, your house is still there. So
Sure.
issues, yeah, just a
Yeah.
couple. And
Yeah.
anyway, so it does. I mean, I've always been extremely sympathetic to people who have suffered loss to their property and their homes, and obviously worse, because I was in it long enough to see people who lost their lives in all of this. You can have a lot of sympathy and be very empathic towards these folks and be very involved in their recovery and all of that. But it ain't the same until you've lived it. So
Yeah, the problem, and I'm sympathetic and stuff too, but the thing that frustrates me is a lot of it is somewhat preventable. In the mitigation beforehand, in the fire smart practices, for example, in Canada, FireWise in the States, you can build your property as you did to withstand a burnover, basically, and hopefully survive. The California is doing this now after the Palisades fire. They've enacted new wildfire mapping, and they're enacting new restrictions for people, and it's retroactive. You have to clean up your property. So I was just at the Alberta Fire Chiefs Conference in Calgary this week, and this was a hot subject while we were there. And it's one of my pet peeves. As you know, I'm a report nerd, so that's why I asked you about the reports yet, because I finished. I just passed on actually to the Alberta government the Maui report, which some of the key people there have not read it yet, which indicates all the stuff that went wrong. And so I highlighted a copy and I sent it to them. And I also sent them the Waldo Canyon report, which for you people that don't know, if you're interested in wildfire and WUI protection, you need to read the NIST Waldo Canyon report. It was the most successful wildland urban interface firefight in history that I know of. And they saved 75% of the homes that had ignited from the wildfire. They saved 75% of them. They actually went into the neighborhoods and they fought the fires. It was in an urban area, a suburban area. They had roads, they had fire hydrants, and they had 60 fire apparatus on scene within 2 or 3 hours, and they had a Type 2 incident management team in place within 3 hours. Those were why it was successful. Not unlike what I heard this week from Jasper, another big wildfire. We're waiting for the reports to come out. One of the fire chiefs that was in Jasper after they evacuated all the wildland firefighters said those Jasper firefighters did an amazing job saving what they did, which I know they did. He said there was only 37 firefighters in Jasper when the fire burned through the town because they didn't have more. They'd kicked all the wildland ones out and they hadn't called or hadn't received the help from all the others. I'm probably going to get some phone calls on these comments, but I was, I suspected it, but I actually heard it firsthand from a guy who said, yep, there was 37 firefighters saving the town. And most of them lost their homes. Anyway, got me on a roll.
yeah, not to undercut what you said there, Paul, and I don't mean it this way at all, but every single incident, there's always aspects of it that don't go well.
Yeah.
And anybody who's on the inside of these incidents will tell you this happened or that happened. But overall, if you don't plan on how you're going to specifically address these types of incidents, and you got no plans that specifically address these areas of the community that are at risk. So in our cases where these wildfires are, DNR had identified the communities as being at extreme to severe fire risk years in advance of the actual incident. The day I bought my property and moved on, I moved in after my house was built. Before actually, I said, there's going to be a serious wildfire in this area at some point, but I want to live in a peaceful part of the province, of the city. So I'm going to do the things that I got to do to protect my property and try to encourage my neighbors. But the reality is if you don't plan, you don't take prevention methods, or steps, you're not planning for mitigation. You can't depend entirely on emergency response to solve the problems. Red lights and sirens don't do it. It's the people who are on the hoses with the equipment. If you don't have the right equipment, the right training, the right confidence, the right backup, the right infrastructure, you're going to lose, man.
Yeah. Well, the province of Alberta here just changed legislation. They are now mandating every community in the province to have evacuation plans. So this is the kind of thing that, because they see that this is important, and communities need to plan for it. They did the evac in Jasper. Jasper had done lots of evacuation planning. They even had an evacuation exercise a year or two before. So they got everybody out, which is great. And that's why they're trying to do this. So anyway, all good points. We could go on for days on wildfires and mitigation and incidents and stuff. And so we won't bore you with that. That's another
we have.
podcast. And we have, yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned, I did attend the Alberta Fire Chiefs Conference this week. A few key points that I took away from sessions were NFPA was there giving an update on the single stair up to 6-story buildings that people are pushing, and some legislation has been changed. Not code. They're not changing code. It's quicker just to change legislation and bylaws. So that's something that's up and coming in the discussion. They also talked about the lithium ion battery standard, which for the fixed systems is 855. And there's guidance in 855 in the annex regarding portable energy storage systems. And there will be a new standard coming out, likely to be called NFPA 800, about portable energy storage systems like the ones in your lawnmower, in your car, and your wherever. So because fires on ESS systems continue to grow exponentially, there was some numbers brandied around in the last week or two, 70 to 100 and some percent growth over the last 3 or 4 years on energy storage system fires. So this is a problem that we're going to be facing. There was a great LinkedIn article. If you like me on LinkedIn, I'll share it. I share it. Recently, Denis, you saw it too. Saying that in the next 20 or so many years, I can't remember how many years it was, they are expecting fire departments to be responding to 25,000 electric energy storage system fires a year, which we're not ready for it. We barely have the training. Montreal Fire was here in Alberta sharing their procedures for energy storage system fires. They had a big one. They had a sea can full of batteries at the port that they fought. Eventually, they brought a crash truck in with a piercing nozzle and pierced the sea can and put it out after many hours of trying to cool it and stuff. And so that was interesting at the conference as well. Some of the subjects that were discussed, fire smart, I don't know what else, but anyway, it was good to connect with people and share the messages.
Well, it's good I wasn't there, Paul. It's been 10 years since I've been at the Ontario Fire Chiefs conferences. And if I walked in there, they would just say, who's the old guy who left the door open?
Exactly. It'd been 5 years since I'd been there too. And it was like, wow, what are you doing now, Paul? It's like, aren't you retired? Well, yeah, plus I teach, plus I podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, like they care.
Yeah, exactly. Some current events, been a lot of fire truck accidents again, folks. We have to be more careful. We're driving too fast. These trucks are too easy to drive. 2 firefighters in North Carolina injured and they rolled the truck over recently. There was another one just today. I read online, fire truck responding to scene. Yesterday, there was another truck that went off a curve, couldn't negotiate the curve fast enough and lost control and hit the ditch on the side. The Washington homeowner that a fire truck slid down an icy road and hill into their house a couple of years ago in Washington State, did a couple 360s. There's video. If you haven't watched it, it is interesting.
Scary.
And she got a settlement. Yeah, you can't do anything. You're just sliding away.
Yeah.
And then,
oh my God.
yeah, in Crawford, Colorado, a mechanical issue when they were out of fire pumping, and somehow the mechanical issue caused the truck to move when they throttled up the pump. Obviously, probably not chalked. Why do you chalk wheels? Because that could happen if there's a problem. The sequence doesn't work, or the operator or the machine doesn't work properly, and it could kill somebody.
And not little tiny chalks. You got to buy the right ones for the big wheels.
Oh, I hate those folding ones. Those are finger pinchers.
Yeah.
I know, but you get
why
big
you're supposed to have your
tires.
gloves on.
Yeah, put your gloves on. Big tires, big shocks, right? Let's see. We've been doing the public, these tips, FDNY tips. There's a book online available, a PDF, and it's called FDNY Tips, and it's from incidents that they've had. They publish a little tip, and they publish it for everybody. So we've been sharing these when we do each episode. Recently, a member suffered a lung injury after inhaling toxic smoke while investigating the report of an electrical fire in a mechanical control room. Over the last few years, there have been several instances where members have been injured or experienced very close calls operating at fires involving electrical mechanical equipment. Several explosions have occurred. When you respond to these fires in these areas, here's some following points to consider. If you encounter doors that contain high voltage warning signs, or do not attempt to force entry, open breakers, or extinguish a fire. Entering these areas will expose you to fatal levels of electricity. What's that called? Arc flash, right?
Yes, you don't have to order cremation either.
Yeah.
It'll fry you,
Ooh,
literally.
nasty. Yeah, you're right. Operating a handline on high voltage equipment is extremely dangerous and may cause an explosion to occur. As a result of the handline being operated on a high voltage electrical vault in the hallway, they have pictures of an explosion that happened. Which these electrical vaults are everywhere. I was doing a inspection on a 3 or 4 story hotel, and in the hallway they had big electrical vaults in every hallway to distribute the electricity because we're a high electricity demand public now, and so everything's plugged in, everything's electrical, and therefore the distribution system has to keep up. Not every room with high voltage equipment will contain a warning sign. Mechanical control rooms often contain high voltage equipment. If machinery is involved in a fire, it might be charged. Purple K works well at electrical fire. So a Purple K extinguisher, which most people don't even know what they have in their extinguisher, they just go, it's a ABC dry powder. But if you have a BC dry chemical extinguisher, it's likely it's Purple K, which is the extinguishing medium. Firefighting PPE does not provide any level of protection from electric shock. Smoke from machinery room fires might be extremely toxic. Don your SCBA facepiece prior to making entry. Even in light smoke conditions, there is a chance PCBs may be present, which most likely now PVCs, which is polyvinyl chloride, will be present. What's PCBs again? Do you remember what that stands for, Denny?
Yeah, polychlorinated biphenyls.
Right, and that's the oil in the oils, right? The cooling oils and stuff.
Yeah, it's a contaminant, actually. It's not a high percentage, but it's a contaminant in the cooling oils in things like transformers and capacitors. And so I think some high voltage switches also may have them also. But it's an oil, right? And so if you got a fire, you got heat, it becomes aerosol or evaporates. And so hard to escape, right?
Yeah,
Dangerous in small quantities.
yeah, and it remains around, right? That's because it's banned now. I think you're not supposed to have them anymore, right? If they
Yeah,
can be.
once you get it into your bloodstream or in your body, it doesn't like to come out.
It says the last point, use extreme caution while investigating exposures during manhole fires. There have been several instances where extremely strong explosions have occurred in cellars or meter rooms due to CO or natural gas infiltration. And they put pics here, a link to pics at an FDIY operation due to natural gas infiltration into a manhole fire. I know there was a fire recently, northern Alberta. Somebody shot at a transformer to get the oil to leak out and catch fire. That seems to be an entertaining thing these days. Along with kids, did you hear the news article? Kids put a pencil or something conductive into the USB port of your Chromebook and it lights it up. Apparently, that's a thing that you're supposed to do. And you do a video and post it on TikTok. You have to get right on that, Denny.
Yeah, that'll cause your battery to overheat also. So you can follow up that trick with a lithium ion battering fire.
Exactly. Okay.
That'll get the teacher's attention,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Class
Crazy what people will
dismissed.
do. Yeah. Okay. This week's episode. Most of the
Okay,
information
mommy will buy
from
you another
this.
one.
Okay. This week's episode, most of this week's information comes from the Building Construction for the Fire Service article by Rick DeGroot, which was derived from the NIOSH report F 2002-20 and also the NIOSH report.
Okay, so the introduction to this is basically the May 3rd of 2002. So you're 23 years ago, thereabouts. A St. Louis, Missouri firefighter by the name of Derek Martin. He died after he became lost and ran out of air while searching for another firefighter Robert Morrison. So there's firefighter Martin and firefighter Morrison. And they were at a 4-alarm, 2-story commercial structure fire. I don't believe it was 4-alarm at the time that they were lost, but became
it
4-alarm.
went later. Yep.
So firefighter Morrison was identified as missing when he failed to respond to a member accountability role called a MARC or a PAR, which sometimes they're called. Firefighter Martin had been in the structure, but he then, after knew that Morrison was missing, re-entered the structure to search for Morrison as part of a search and rescue team. Shortly thereafter re-entering, Martin became lost and radioed Mayday several times. After extensive searches for both missing firefighters, they were located and they were removed from the structure and provided medical attention on the scene. After being transported to a local hospital, firefighter Martin was pronounced dead on arrival. He was the guy who went looking for firefighter Morrison, who was pronounced dead the following day, died the following day.
Yeah, tragic call. I know it's on the edge of our 25 years, so we try not to do anything that's older than 2000 unless it's a special instance. But this was definitely worth learning about this one. It wasn't actually that big of a structure, right? So,
No,
um,
4 alarms, my goodness. You
yeah,
think this is, but things were going wrong. That's the message there.
yeah. So the structure in this case was a two-story commercial brick structure of ordinary construction, situated in a connected row with several other properties of variable roof heights. The roof of the involved structure was relatively flat and sealed with built-up roofing materials. There were two entrances on the alpha side at the ground level. The west entrance led to the upper level via a stairway, and the east entrance accessed the lower level through the doorway. Both entrances were secured by padlock swinging wrought iron gate or door. There were no man doors noted at the lower level from the Bravo or Delta sides. However, there was one man door on the west side or the Charlie side and a gated garage door at the east side of the Charlie end. There was sort of car parking in the bottom level, right? They had a garage for a vehicle or something.
Yeah, for doing work on air conditioning units, I suspect,
Right.
because
There
that's
were
what they did.
five.
So you,
There were there was a heating and refrigeration ventilation company.
so there was a lane at the back of this property where you could access this loading door or garage door at the back,
Mhm.
and a man door back there too. So
There were 5 openings on the second level, Delta side, one being partially bricked over, with the remainder being closed with block glass. 2 windows on the first level, Alpha side, and 3 relatively tall windows on the second level, Alpha side. So you had the 2 man doors, 2 windows, and then 4 windows above on the second floor. Other than the block glass window on the Delta side, all the windows were either made of plexiglass or sealed substantially with wood. The structure was uninhabited at the time of the incident. The total area of the building was only 3,150 square feet. The first level consisted of 2 rooms for a total of 1,500 square feet. The front room of the structure was approximately 300 square feet. The second level consisted of 4 rooms and was also 1,500 square feet. The stairway access broke off into the 2 entrances at the second level, one leading to the north and one to the east.
So the one to the north was heading towards the Charlie side, and the one to the east was heading towards the Delta side. So we're going to talk a little bit about the St. Louis Fire Department. So St. Louis is the second largest city in the state of Missouri and sits near the confluence of the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers. The city does. The city is only 66 square miles in size, and had a population of about 350,000 residents in the year 2000 census. Interestingly, St. Louis had lost more than 60% of its population since the 1950 census, and as a result, there were a large number of vacant and abandoned properties across the city. So this is not an uncommon tale. There's a lot of cities like this, and they keep cropping up in these podcasts, Paul,
Yeah,
where a lot of empty
that's
buildings.
vacant buildings are a huge problem. I didn't know that St. Louis had similar problems to like Baltimore and Detroit
Yeah,
and other places that we've talked about.
yeah. I didn't realize Missouri was in the Rust Belt, but I guess possibly it is. So
Sort of
undoubtedly, do
the western edge, right?
yeah, lots of manufacturing. I'm guessing, and some old railway changes and all of that stuff. Anyway, at the time of the incident, the city was protected by the St. Louis Fire Department, which at that time was operating out of 30 stations and had 682 career firefighter on staff and 36 apparatus. So most stations A are single unit, either an engine or a couple of them probably had engines and aerials.
Yeah, so it's kind of similar to like Saskatoon or Regina or a lot of Canadian mid-sized cities, not the big metropolitans.
Yeah, I mean, I was a a fire chief in a city, and it was around 80 square kilometers, so less than 60 square miles, probably about 50 square miles. And we ran it out of 5 stations, and here they're running
Mhm.
out of 30 stations. So
Yeah.
the stations are fairly close together, as we'll see when we start looking at timelines for arrival and so forth. Um, So there were of the 2 victims that we noted already, there was firefighter Robert Morrison. He had been a firefighter for 11 years and 5 months, so 11 and a half years. And then firefighter Derek Martin, who had been a firefighter for 11 years and 10 months. So they're basically contemporaries of each other. Both had successfully completed the the state required fire academy training, which included NFPA 1001 firefighters level 1 and level 2. So a little bit about the incident. I'm going to read the first part of it, and then Paul's going to take over. So the incident occurred, as I'd already mentioned, on May 3rd, 2002. And the alarm was at 21:02 hours, 21:02 hours. So what, 2 minutes past 9 p.m. So it would have been dark or just gone dark at that time. So a telephone alarm was received by the Emergency Communications Center, fire alarm in other words, of a reporting a potential fire at the Gravois Refrigeration Company on Gravois Avenue. A first alarm assignment was dispatched, and in that assignment, it was engines 1, 29, 7, and 11, and hook and ladder 6, then rescue 1, and battalion chiefs 1 and 2. Hook and ladder, I don't know what it was, if it was a stick or a platform. We don't know, Paul. It's not really relevant. Anyway, the crews arrived on scene at 21:05 hours, so 3 minutes later. So, like I said, not a long response time. At least the first crew arrived. At 21:08 hours, which was 6 minutes after the alarm, Battalion 1 arrived and took command. And he observed firefighters entering the upper and lower levels of the structure from side Alpha, which meant that they had entered the door at the Bravo side of the Alpha side. That door we mentioned towards the Bravo side, and on the lower level they had entered the other door from the Alpha side, which was towards the Delta side of the building. So initial size up indicated that there was light gray smoke coming, and that there was a fire coming out of the building, and that there was a fire on the first level. Command then called for police traffic control and assigned engine 7 to be a backup water for engine 1. Engine 1 had an 1.75-inch hose line pulled that they were using on their entry into the lower level entrance. And engine 29 was assigned to backup hook and ladder 6. So firefighters from Rescue 1, Engine 7, and Engine 29 forced entry to that west entrance on the Alpha side, which gave them access to the upper level doors. And then they progressed up the stairway to the second level and were intent on conducting a primary search, checking for fire extension, and another task was to ventilate the windows on the second story. At the same time, Engine 1 forced entry to that eastern Alpha side entrance, which gave access to the lower level, and they advanced an 1.75-inch hose line through that east side entryway to the first level, and they were backed up by a crew from Engine 11. A positive pressure fan was then set up in the doorway of that entrance to ventilate the lower level. When the team hit the fire with a hose line at the first level, it appeared as though they had knocked down on the fire almost immediately. During this fire attack, several firefighters noted that there were holes in the ceiling of the first floor up to the second floor, and they noted that embers and fire where the ceiling tires were pulled. So they pulled ceiling tiles, and they could see embers and some fire up in that overhead. After it had appeared that the fire had been knocked down, the crews believed that the fire must have extended to the second level. Had extended, they figure. Seems likely, because if you got fire up in that area, you can see through. So the crews from Engine 1 and Engine 11 pulled out of the lower level and pulled the hose line out, but didn't bring their captain with them. So the crews left, but the captain stayed behind. So Engine 11 captain stayed behind on the first level. And then they moved over to the other door, which was on the other side of the Alpha side of the building, which led to the upper level entrance, and went up the stairs to the second floor. Because the crews that had already gone up hadn't taken a hose line with them. So there was only one line in the building. It had gone in the lower level door, did a knockdown, pulled out, then went back and went into the upper level door. That's what happened. And everybody pulled out of the lower level except for the captain of engine 11.
Yeah. So at about 21:14, so 12 minutes into the initial call time, captain from engine 11 became separated when he progressed further into the first floor of the building, as the rest of the crew pulled out and went to the second floor, as Denis just mentioned. He reportedly opened an overhead roll-up type garage door that accessed the outside on the first level. So that's that garage into the lane on the Charlie side. As he turned around, he saw the fire flare up and roll across the ceiling towards him. A van was parked by the garage door, but did not obstruct his movement. The smoke, fire, and heat significantly intensified at this time. The captain from engine 11 could not retreat back through the building. When he attempted to leave the structure through the garage door opening, he realized that a lock on the metal security gate outside of the garage door, so this was a separate gate outside the garage door, prevented his escape. The captain from engine 11 called command twice via radio with no response from battalion and battalion chief 2, who wasn't command but he was on scene, once with no response. He then called fire alarm and stated he was forced to the floor by the heat and he needed extrication out the back of the structure by the garage door. The captain from Rescue 1 was in the immediate area behind the structure. After repeated failed attempts to cut the lock on the gate, the captain from Rescue 1 enlisted the aid of 2 citizens who helped him pull the gate up and partially off its hinges. At the same time, 2 inch and 3/4 hose lines were pulled off engine 1 and were working on site Alpha. Simultaneously, on the upper level, while this is going on at the back, on the Charlie side, first floor, firefighters from Rescue 1, Engine 7, and Engine 11, and Engine 29 were checking for fire extension and began ventilating the windows. According to radio transmissions, fire alarm called command at 21:16 hours and informed them that they had a firefighter trapped, captain of Engine 11, at the rear of the building in the garage area by the overhead garage door. After the extrication of the captain at 21:18, command called for all firefighters from the first level to be accounted for. And at that time, it was believed that all members were accounted for. Command then instructed the captain from engine 29 to advance a 2.5 inch hose line, so 65 mil line, from engine 1 to side Charlie. A second 2.5 inch hose line was also pulled off engine 11 to side Charlie, because they had that fire probably roaring out that garage door that was open now, right? A firefighter from engine 29, who was ventilating windows on the second level, saw and heard Rescue 1 firefighter Robert Morrison behind him, and he stated that he appeared to be lost. Visibility was very poor at the time, and it was getting very hot. Simultaneously, at 21:18 hours, command called for a member accountability roll call, like a PAR, where all firefighters are to exit the building and report their companies for accountability. Firefighter told Morrison that he knew the way out, and they began crawling towards where he thought the stairway was. He then lost firefighter Morrison and started to feel as though he was becoming lost himself. He backtracked the way he had come and found Morrison lying face down and unresponsive on the floor. He attempted to pull Morrison towards where he thought the stairs were, but he was unsuccessful. He immediately radioed for help and mayday several times, but radio traffic was very congested. When he began to run out of air and it was apparent that no one heard his distress calls, he was forced to leave the firefighter behind. As he made it to the stairs, he ran out of air and his mask began sucking into his face. He escaped the building at approximately 21:20 hours and yelled to Battalion 2 that a firefighter was down on the second floor, and then he ran to have his SCBA tank replaced. The firefighter did not re-enter the structure, but a search party was formed and several other firefighters, including Rescue 1 firefighter Derek Martin, re-entered the second level of the building to search. Firefighter Morrison was quickly found by a fellow firefighter from Rescue 1. Several other firefighters assisted in his removal down the stairs.
So it's interesting to note some of the timelines here. The first truck on scene was at 21:05, and when this firefighter had to leave firefighter Morrison because he was out of air was at 21:20. So that's 15 minutes into the call. So was he on air the whole time? Probably not. By the time, they got off the truck and got geared up and stretched the line and opened the door on the west side there of the Alpha side and managed to make it up the stairs and so forth. So when you're working hard, climbing stairs, heavy heat conditions, searching back and forth, it's not a 30-minute tank on your back. It's not a 20-minute tank on your back. It's what it is for you. And so 10, 15 minutes working hard, that's all you're going to get out of it, particularly
Yeah.
if you're a big guy who consumes a lot of air, right?
Yeah,
So,
air management, right? That's where we're deficient. That's why NFPA changed the low
right,
air alarm from 25% to 33 and a third to try to give people
right,
a little bit more time on the
right,
low air part of their tank.
right, right. And we don't know that they had entry accountability where they were going in. It doesn't sound like it. And so who was keeping track of who was in there and what the air levels were and when they should be expected to be running into troubles. You don't use all your air and run out of air before you decide to make your exit. So there's all of those factors involved in that. So
Some people
anyway,
say that if you exit the structure and your low air alarm is ringing, that's a mayday.
yeah,
That's not
that's
how
a
we
fail.
work really, but
Yeah,
that's, what they say.
yeah. Essentially, that's a fail because if something
Yeah.
happened that delayed you from that very fine timing, you'd be in
Hmm.
a lot of trouble. Anyway, so I just mentioned all that because that should be running through your head when you're hearing this narrative about air management and how long was he in there, and did he have a full tank to start with, did they come off another call and they were, like all of these things, was there a malfunction on the pack? And it turns out later there was, but we'll find out about some of those things. So the captain from Rescue 1 took another head count of his company and then realized that firefighter Martin was missing. He informed command. Another search party was formed and the building was then re-entered on the second level, so they knew he was up there. A second inch and three-quarter hose line was advanced up to the second floor as the personal alert safety system device, PASS device, on firefighter Martin was heard in the rear of the structure, so back on the Charlie side. This building is not too wide, but it is pretty deep. And two rooms. Remember, we said there's a room at the front where the stairs come up, and then a room at the back, which is a larger room. So a firefighter on the rescue team then located Martin near the Delta side, but towards the back. At this time, conditions had seriously deteriorated, and the intense heat drove some of the firefighters back. Remember, the garage door was open on the Charlie side. The front doors were open below. There were holes between the lower level and the upper level. The door was open. The firefighters had been taking out windows. So it was a well ventilated fire at this point. Anyway, so conditions seriously deteriorating. Intense heat drove some of the firefighters back. Firefighters brought a ladder then to the adjacent one-story building that was on the Charlie side, and they made entry through a window onto the Delta. So they got up onto the roof of the Charlie, um, on the Charlie side, on the back, and onto the roof of this building that was on the Delta exposure, and then went to these boarded up and blocked up windows on the Delta side because they knew he was roughly over there. Anyway, the windows were heavily boarded up and had to be forced open. So the firefighter was then found, the missing firefighter, which is Morrison, I believe, Martin, right? I'm sorry. He was then found in a prone position, not too far from the window, and he was removed through the window and onto that adjoining one-story building. Firefighter Martin was then brought to the lower level in a Stokes basket. So they got a Stokes up there, they loaded him on, and then they lowered the Stokes basket. Hook and Ladder 2 did that work. Then an EMT was provided, both injured firefighters with some treatment, and they were immediately transported to the hospital via EMS. Martin was produced dead upon his arrival at the hospital, and Morrison died the next day. It was later determined that Martin had been missing for approximately 29 minutes before he was found, and Morrison had been missing for approximately 20 minutes. So well below the endurance of their air packs for sure.
Yeah, tragic story. Just a
Yep.
regular routine call that went bad very quickly, as it can
Yeah.
happen. So watch out for the
Yeah.
warning signs: abandoned buildings, boarded up doors, holes in the ceiling. Got fuel load here. Security gates, if they're not taken care of. These are all things that we need to think about. So
Yeah,
on to
and
the.
plus this building, you didn't have Bravo side access. There was another building there adjacent, another
Mhm.
two-story building, so you couldn't get in from that side. And the Delta side access, there was no ground level access to the building along that side. There was only access from the roof of an adjoining building through heavily fortified windows. And the Charlie side access was protected by security gates, and plus it's in an alley, right? So access. So not only is this building not occupied, not only is it boarded up, it's secured.
Yep. Often, truck company
Danger
guys are
signs.
told to go, go soften up the back doors right away. You might need to get at them. So as soon as you get there, you need to take care of utilities and soften the structure. So if you need to open a door, you can. So we get to the recommendations and discussion part of the podcast, which is really why we're here, is to recommendation number one. Should ensure that team continuity is maintained. So we had firefighters getting separated from each other, and that wasn't jumped on right away with the captain staying on the first floor while the rest of his firefighters went to the second floor. The discussion on this, of course, is team continuity involves knowing who's on your team and who's the leader. Staying within visual contacts at all times. If visibility is obscured, then teams should remain within touch or voice distance of each other. Communicating your needs and observations to the team leader, rotating to rehab, staging as a team, and watching your other team members practice strong buddy care approach. This used to drive me absolutely nuts when I was in the volunteer fire service as an officer and a chief officer. When the firefighters would get all mixed up at the scene, they wouldn't stay with their truck companies or their engine company, and soon enough, you could lose people very easily. I got quite strict with this. I actually bought tags for all the SCBAs that said what truck they were. And anytime I saw somebody with a different truck number associating with the other truck number, I would get on them and say, get back with your company. You have to stay in a team or a company. I love in the States, the Eastern United or Western United States, a lot of them wear helmet magnets with their truck number on it. And that way you can immediately identify who's who in the zoo kind of thing. Because if you leave your team, they don't know you lost them and they might not be looking for you.
Yeah. Similarly, you enter at the front and exit at the back, right? And in a case like this, if you exit at the back, like the Captain 11, they finally got him out the back. It's a bit of a walk to get around to the front, and who knows you've been found, and who knows where the rest of your team is, and what does your team know about you, and et cetera, right? So,
Yep.
anyway, recommendation number 2, fire departments should ensure that a rapid intervention team, RIT team or RIC team, or whatever you call it in your department, should ensure that it is established and it is in position immediately upon arrival. A rapid intervention team should respond to every working structure fire, whether it's needed or not. The team should report to the IC and remain at the staging area until an intervention is required to rescue a firefighter. A RIT should have all the tools necessary to complete the job: a search rope, rescue rope, first aid, and a resuscitator to use in case a firefighter needs assistance. There's a lot more to RIT teams than that short list. RIT teams need to be fully aware of the tactics and tasks that are going on at the time. So they need to be listening. They need to have a concept of who's where. In some departments, they use the RIT team to throw some ladders, even. Provided
Absolutely.
it's like on the alpha side, close to where they're set up. And they want the RIT team to remain engaged in what's going on mentally, so that they have a picture and understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So
When I took
you're not there goofing off and waiting to be called. You're actually
yeah,
engaged.
I took the emergency scene management courses with the JIBC as part of my 1021 officer training. And yeah, right away, it's like if you have people on the second floor, they went up via the stairway or whatever, you need to ladder the second floor. They need a second exit. You must provide that exit and you must tell them, which side the exit is on. That was mandatory. It's standard. You do it all the time. What does RIT do? The guys are inside fighting the fire. Great. Grab a ladder the building. If you got people on the roof, you want to provide a second roof access. It's just like water rescue. We talked the last episode was about water rescue. If you put one boat in the water, you need a second one because your guys have to have a backup. This is during an emergency, right? That's why we're
Yeah,
there. So I'm a
yeah.
little
One
passionate
line.
about that.
Yeah, yeah. One line in the door. Your second one standing right there next to you. And in
Exactly.
this case, you
Backup.
had guys above a fire with no line, and
Yeah.
well, you'll put some pictures up, I guess, from the incident, eh? But you'll see that the windows are not just windows that are closed; these are windows that are boarded up. So when these teams went in to open windows, these are boarded up windows. These aren't just a case of throwing up the sash.
Yeah, no, this is the whole blue card. A team in the area, you got another team on deck, and then you have RIT as well. So this is very important. Now, 2002, that's early RIT days. We were just getting organized with that kind of stuff. So hopefully we're getting better now.
Yeah.
Maybe. And the RIT should have a
Yeah.
thermal imaging camera as well. They don't mention it here because that was new then. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not that
so,
new.
not no. Let's
I had
see.
him for 10 years at that point.
Let's see. Recommendation number 3, fire departments should ensure that the incident command system is fully implemented at the fire scene. The discussion about that, of course, is ICS defines the roles and responsibilities to be assumed by personnel and the operating procedures to be used in the management and direction of emergency incidents and their functions. The incident commander is the individual with the overall responsibility to implement and oversee the system. I won't go too much into depth here. This report from 2002 doesn't cover the 8 functions of command and all that kind of stuff that has been adopted by many now, but it just says assume, confirm, and position of command. So, hello, I am, Chief One. I'm going to be assuming command for this incident and where I am. I'm on the Alpha side, the Delta side, whatever. Evaluate the situation, gather your information, do a 360 or get one done, see what you got, what you're working with. Initiate, maintain, and control communications. Very, very important. And I know I harp away on Blue Card, but that's really what Blue Card is. It's communication training. It's training officers using simulations to control the communications on scene so that you can communicate when there's an emergency, because we need to be able to deal with that emergency. Deployment, of course, where your ICS span of control, like no more than 7 people reporting to you. I would say in a immediately dangerous to life and health environment, such as inside this building, you don't want more than 3 people reporting to you, or three units. And then strategy, incident action planning. What am I going to do? What am I going to do next? What am I going to do? What if something fails? The conditions present at this incident included a seemingly vacant building with 2 levels, very few accessible openings to the outside, energized overhead power lines impeded access to the second level from the rear, and holes in the second level floor. These conditions, combined with an active fire, created an environment with numerous hazards for the firefighters. I'll
Yeah,
get
you
off my
talk about
soapbox now.
incident command and the roles of incident command and and all the various boxes that have got to be checked, if you will, on your incident action plan. This is 2002. Brunacini's Fireground Command, which is basically encapsulates all of this and has since morphed into Blue Card. It's become Blue Card. But
Yep.
in 2002, Bruno's Fireground Command System was 20 years old at
Yeah, it
that
was
time.
came in the 80s. Yep.
Yeah, the early 80s. I know because I was teaching it in 83.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
so it wasn't taken on board by everybody. And even nowadays there's some departments and I'm going to point the finger at some of the bigger departments that have got so much momentum in a certain, this is how we do it type fashion are slower, I think, to see the value in these types of systems. Man, the world moves on. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
every time you buy a car, there's new technology in it. Every
Yeah.
time you buy a fire truck, there's new technology in it. Every time you buy a fire hose, there's new technology in it. Generally,
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean,
so it's
you
time to
need
look at these
to
things.
establish command, maintain command, and communications. That's why the field incident technician, the driver for the battalion chief, is so important, because at a fire like this, it quickly becomes overwhelming for that incident commander. I just see that was something in the current events that I missed. Was LA City or County, one of the two? I'm not sure. I think it was City, maybe it was County. Anyway, has decided they're cutting their field incident technicians. The battalion chief's driver, a critical. How many podcasts have we done that? The recommendation was have a helper for the incident commander.
Yeah, but I think that's a misnomer and a disservice to call them the battalion chief's driver,
It is. It is.
because anybody can drive. You could get a cabbie to drive you as far as that goes.
Yeah.
I need to go to this
It's
fire, take me there. It's not about that. It's about what they do. I mean, that's, to me, it's as great a disservice as calling the one paramedic who's driving the ambulance an ambulance driver. I mean,
okay.
and hey, Paul.
I
So I mean,
touched a
that's a
nerve.
disservice
Ouch.
too. Yeah,
The
that's a disservice too.
field incident technician.
Yeah. better when you're explaining to your budget committee what this guy does.
Yeah. He manages the incident. Okay.
So anyway, recommendation 4, fire departments should ensure that firefighters, when they are operating on a floor above the fire, have a charged hose line with them. There's people that would argue this, you're just going in for a, vent, enter, and search, secure, whatever. But that's not really what was going on here. They were really taking some definite actions and we're up there, for an entire bottle. Anyway, it's good practice to have a charged hose line when operating the floor above the fire. When there is a risk of extension to concealed spaces and attics, additional precautionary lines are needed in each of these areas. So maybe more than one line. Backup lines may also be needed in other areas above the fire. In this, like looking exposure lines, basically extension lines. In this incident, several firefighters made it to the second floor to perform truck-like operations, ventilating and searching for extension above the fire, and they were not equipped with a charged hose line. Many departments, that's kind of a traditional role of the truckies, right?
Yeah,
You
it's
go
pretty
without a
normal.
line. But they only go without a line because they know that the engine company is bringing the line behind them. That's essentially where that security comes, or the engine company is keeping the fire away from them, if you know what I mean,
I
protecting
mean,
their
they
exits.
did assume there was, because they said they thought they had the fire knocked down. So but they may have heard that and said, okay, we're going to be all right. They got the fire knocked down. Obviously, it
Yeah,
wasn't, because when they opened
yeah.
the back door, then the fire went nuts.
Yeah, it's easy to second guess them at this stage. Difficult
Yeah,
what they actually knew at the time, but they knew they needed a line on the second floor because they pulled the line from the first floor and put it up to the
went up.
second
Yep,
floor. So
yep.
that suggests to me that all the equipment hadn't arrived. And so when you're bringing an equipment crew at a time from a bunch of different stations all over the city, even though the first truck arrived in 3 minutes,
3 minutes.
how long did it take for the last necessary truck to arrive?
Yeah,
Longer than that.
and there may have been some, we don't know. I mean, what was the thing that somebody said that we don't get the, what's the attitude, what's the mindset at the time of the fire? It's a abandoned old building in a row of old buildings, and okay, what are we going to do? Recommendation 5, fire departments should instruct and train firefighters on manually activating their pass device when they become lost, disoriented, or trapped. Now remember, your pass device will, when you stop moving, it'll go off on its own, but you don't have to wait for it. If you're in an emergency, you're lost, it's a great idea to go ahead and turn it on. The discussion, if a firefighter becomes lost or disoriented or injured, a few simple steps can facilitate rescue and reduce the chance of further injury. The first step is radio transmission of Mayday situation, followed by the firefighter providing the RIT or RIC team and IC with clues as to his last known location, second floor, Delta side, whatever. The firefighter's second step involves manually activating the pass device. The final step requires the firefighter to maintain calm, conserving air, stay in radio contact with command and the RIT crew, and to survey the surroundings in an attempt to gain a bearing of direction or potential escape routes. Use those other senses, right? Your ears, you can hear, you can feel. Try to remember which way you went. But definitely activating your pass device is very important. In this case, firefighters identified the fact that victim number one's pass device was activating. The investigators were unable to determine through interviews or equipment examination whether victim number two's pass device had gone into alarm mode or not. So save some time, get that alarm. After you initiate the radio so that they can hear you and you can hear them, then turn your pass alarm on manually with the big red button on your SCBA controller.
Yeah. And you may get ribbed about it after you get back to the station. But that's nothing in a big ship. They're
So
still
you
going to
gotta,
pour water in your boots
yeah,
regardless.
got to
So
buy some ice cream.
that's right. Whereas one of my buddies used to say, it's your turn in the barrel.
Uh,
Okay, recommendation 6. Fire departments should ensure that a separate incident safety officer, an ISO, who's independent from the incident commander is appointed. So somebody who's got an extra set of eyes and ears specifically for the safety aspects of what's going on. So while the IC is in overall command at the scene, certain functions must be delegated to ensure there's adequate scene management, and that's accomplished. According to NFPA 1500, which is the occupational health and safety standard for fire departments, paragraph 6.1.3, so that's at the time now, it's a 20-year-old reference. I did not verify that's still the paragraph. Anyway, says as incidents escalate in size and complexity, the IC shall divide the incident into tactical level management units, um, referring again to span of control, and assign an ISO, incident safety officer, to assess the incident scene for hazards or for potential hazards. Usually, your ISO is a senior person who's got some experience and is certainly not your junior guy learning. Certainly, is somebody who has some command experience too, I would suggest. So, the most effective ISOs are those who operate as a consultant to the IC. They provide, in other words, advice and information to the IC, and the IC recognizes the expertise of the safety officer. The ISO establishes a relationship with the IC by asking what the action plan is, because there is an action plan, right, guys? Followed by a summary of the current situation status and resource statuses. So, in other words, what's there, what's coming, possibly advice on what's needed. And this was a 4-alarm incident eventually, so clearly there were a lot of resources activated. During this incident, the IC was also acting as the safety officer. So the IC became the safety officer and was thus limited in being able to perform the additional functions of a separate ISO. And in this incident, too, I would make further comment is this was a row of commercial/industrial buildings, all connected, and there was operations going on the Charlie side as well as the Alpha side. They had lines stretched. They did a rescue of a fire captain from the Charlie side. How could the IC possibly have complete knowledge of what's going on and see hazards before they were reported on the Charlie side? You need another set of eyes and ears on the Charlie side, and you need an ISO, and you need a second person operating in that role on the other side of the incident, if you will. Sizable incidents may need more than one.
The report doesn't really go into whether they had sectored off at all to like the Charlie division or a second floor division. Definitely there was 2 senior officers there, battalion 1 and 2, so that's definitely what they should do. And if you can't appoint an ISO, and this is the way kind of blue card's going, at least appoint an area commander for that division or group, and then they're a little closer to the problems and they can watch out for safety as well. But definitely, as soon as you get the resources, appoint a safety officer, make sure that they're taking care of the firefighters, the rehab, the risks, etc. Take the course. Was it 1521, I think, is ISO?
Yep. I believe that's right. Keeping in mind that this eventually went to 4 alarms, and there was eventually probably a significant amount of staff on scene.
Right.
It would not have been the case initially, because remember, we had one person trapped and calling a mayday at a little 9 minutes into the incident after the first truck arrived. So their captain 11, engine 11 was trapped. So he was trapped at 21:14 hours, and the first truck arrived on scene at 21:05 hours. So 9 minutes into the incident, there was already somebody trapped and needed rescuing, and was rescued by Rescue 1. But, and I think Battalion 2 might have been around the back. Hard to say. But the conversation related to that rescue was with the battalion chief. So, you may not, like you just said, Paul, have all the staff that you need right away. But this recommendation is in the investigation, right, Paul? And they tend to know more than they write. So
exactly. The recommendation number 7, fire departments should ensure standard operating procedures, SOPs, and equipment are adequate and sufficient to support the volume of radio traffic at multiple alarm fires. We have to be prepared for these big fires. That's why we're here. At times, fireground communications become ineffective because of congested radio traffic and inadequate radio equipment on the fireground. Although the incident commander had central dispatch clear the radio channel for emergency traffic, hence the name of the podcast, by the way, most radio operators continues to use the same channel. In the event of a mayday or emergencies on the fire ground, all firefighters should switch radio operations to a new frequency or other channels. This then opens up the main channel that they were originally on for communication in case of the emergency or lost firefighter. You don't want the mayday person to have to be looking for a different channel. So everybody else goes to another channel, and then the IC works directly with the mayday or lost firefighter person. In this case, the firefighters switched channels, and some switched channels and some did not. So this can lead to a lot of confusion. So you need SOPs for how you're going to do that. I don't care what it is, but have a plan and rehearse it so that people know what we're supposed to do during a busy incident, because that's what we're all there for, right? We just addressed this recently, because they talk about equipment are adequate and sufficient to support the volume of radio traffic. We just did that National Fallen Firefighters Foundation report on the mega warehouse fires with Chief Routley joined us, and radio comms were a problem in there. Now, this is modern. This is 2 years ago. But they also have, everybody's got the new trunk radio systems, which don't work great sometimes in big buildings, concrete metal structures and stuff. So you need repeaters on the fire trucks or a portable repeater in the building. Again, that's what this recommendation addresses, is you have to have the radio system in addition to the training and SOPs to maintain multi-alarm fires, which in a city of 300,000 people, you're going to get multi-alarm fires, especially with lots of vacant buildings.
Yeah. And I know some firefighters strongly support single channel operations at fires and are adamant that, if you split your radio traffic between multiple channels.
Sorry, I'm laughing. Doug's not on the podcast.
Not everybody knows what's going on, but the issue there, of course, is the Engine 11 captain in this case called Mayday 3 times and was never acknowledged.
Yep.
So that's an issue, man. If you can't get a Mayday call in time, or you can't get it in crosswise through other crosstalk, you've got a guy with a handheld radio. He's inside a building, so he's already at a penalty because he's trying to penetrate the building, and he's there with a 2-watt portable radio. And it's on a short little antenna, and lots of times it's tucked into a pocket or against his body. He may be crawling around on the floor trying to avoid getting his helmet burned. I'll call this his helmet. And then you've got some guy out on the street with a fire truck and a 25-watt mobile radio, and he's yakking about pump pressure or arriving, or, I'm going to go down and set up on this corner, and having that conversation. What's the chances of the firefighter with his little radio getting through all of that overpowering transmission coming? And the chances are the winner is the guy in the truck. And so you need to have systems that break that up so that the guy inside on the portable radio who's actually doing the firefighter, whose life is actually at risk, is not losing priority access to the radio to some guy that's just trying to figure out what side of the street to put the fire truck on. So there's an issue. If you don't see that in your department, you don't understand that, then you need to revisit communications and listen to some radio traffic where there's actually guys inside, and just ask yourself, well, how many times did he have to ask that question over the radio before somebody actually acknowledged? And you'll find out that it's more than once usually, because they're getting drowned out. So there's issues. You got to have your SOPs. So recommendation number 8, fire departments should ensure that self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBAs as we know them, or BAs, are properly inspected, used, and maintained to ensure they function properly when needed. So it's rare. So basically they're saying here, it's rare for an SCBA respirator performance evaluation in and of itself to point to a definite cause and a fatality. In this case, they did do a detailed examination, a forensic examination of these packs, the 2 of them for the 2 fatalities after the incident, and they could not determine if the deficiencies that they did discover during those examinations and the testing, they couldn't determine whether those deficiencies existed prior to the victim's death, or the deficiencies were sustained, during the incident and subsequent to the death either from the fire or recovery efforts. You're pulling a firefighter out through a window, you can damage the SCBA doing that, or through the handling and the equipment prior to and during shipping to NIOSH. They couldn't definitively say, yeah, that pass alarm wasn't working. It's not working now, but they couldn't say at what point it stopped working, for instance. So NIOSH testing results were initially that the exhalation valve on unit number 2, and I don't know which unit that is, but anyway, the exhalation valve was stuck closed. So logic would tell you that that couldn't have been the case during the incident because you couldn't breathe out the air pack. But at some point it might have got stuck and the guy pulled the mask off. I don't know. Testing was resumed after the valve was freed. So they had to free up the valve before they could test the unit. And then Unit 2 failed to meet the requirements of the rated service time test. So it didn't perform for the standard amount of time. And the positive pressure tests, those are pretty serious failings, both of those. And that the gauge light failed to indicate the remaining service life on the indicator. So that means that the firefighter, if that was the case at the time, would not have been aware that his pack was going low on air. So these could have all led to the death of the firefighter. But again, like I say, they don't know whether that was in fact at the time or later. So anyway, Unit 2 met the facepiece pressurization requirements of the airflow test, however. So, testing them afterwards is not necessarily a smoking gun, but certainly there were some issues with unit number 2.
So, yeah, exactly. In the epilogue to this event, firefighter Robert Bruce Morrison, age 38, the 12-year veteran of the St. Louis Fire Department. He had graduated in 1988 from Concordia College in Miquelon, Wisconsin, with a BS in biology, joined the St. Louis Fire Department in June of 1990, following the footsteps of his wife Laura's father and his uncle. Leaves behind his wife Laura, 2 children, Matthew and Megan, was posthumously promoted to the rank of captain. Firefighter Derek Duval Martin, age 38, 11-year veteran of the St. Louis Fire Department. Prior to joining the fire department, he served in the U.S. Army before becoming a state corrections officer in Jefferson City and St. Louis. He was active at the Mercy Seat Baptist Church, where he'd been ordained as a deacon. He leaves behind his wife Angela and 3 children, Jordan, Denzel, and Kyla. The department posthumously awarded him a Medal of Valor and promoted him to the rank of captain. In 2003, recipient of the Ray Downey Courage and Valor Award. In 2007, a jury awarded $12 million to firefighter Martin's family and considered additional damages against Survivair, the maker of the breathing equipment that they said killed Martin while firefighting the blaze in 2002. The trial turned on whether a faulty valve on Martin's air mask was to blame for his death, as his widow claimed, or if department procedures were at fault, as the company said. An earlier suit blamed firefighter Morrison's personal distress alarm, also made by Survivair, for failing to bring help when he became incapacitated. Before a jury decided Morrison's case, Survivair reached a sealed settlement with his widow, Loris Morrison, which was reported to be $1 to $5 million. This has come up a few times with several airpack manufacturers, Survivair and Draeger. The thing I noticed is just an observation, and I sold SCBAs for years, is in North America, typically, or in many cases, our SCBA maintenance is minimal. We might do a flow test once a year, and like where they actually document and calibrate the SCBA to make sure it's meeting its manufacturer specifications for flowing air and for when the alarms go off for low air, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we do a test every day when we get on the truck and we make sure that it rings the bell so we know the bell works and we know what the pressure is and we think it's going to work. When I was in Europe a few times on fire truck factory visits, I visited some fire stations. And it's very common in Europe that every SCBA, if it's used at a fire, so it comes off the truck and gets used, it goes for a performance test, a cleaning and an actual flow test, like the one we do here in North America once a year. In Europe, they'll do that every time the SCBA is used at a real call. So the maintenance and the checking is much higher than what we do in the States. So you have to ask yourself, are we not maintaining them and checking them enough, or is Europe doing it too much, I guess? But yeah, definitely they're pointing at the SCBAs here. And there's been some other lawsuits with other companies, as I mentioned, around the same sort of thing.
Yeah, in case you lost count there, both firefighters' families received settlements from lawsuits, both of them from Survive Air. So the SCBA manufacturer at the time. So that I think is significant in and of itself. But they don't talk here about a lawsuit against the fire department. But I would say that that's always a possibility, because just like Paul was saying, the ultimate responsibility for looking after the air packs belongs to the fire department. Here in Canada, there's two standards that are mandatory, not optional. One of them deals with how you supply breathing air itself, so that's the compressor and the cascade system and so forth. And the other one deals specifically with the respirator itself. And these are mandatory to be followed, and there's a lot of requirements in those standards of what you're supposed to be doing, your air management system and so forth. But surprisingly, a lot of fire departments unaware and or don't follow deliberately. And if you're one of those guys that has a department that is unaware of these standards and or CSA standards and or don't follow them, there's a huge, massive liability issue there. And I think air packs are better now, and so it's less likely that the air pack is at fault and more likely that the fire department is at fault. And so if this incident were to happen again today and there were failures or perceived failures in the air packs, it might be more justifiably due to poor maintenance, and or inadequate maintenance and or inadequate inspection. You're supposed to inspect your air packs on a much more than annual basis, although you may not performance test them more often than that. But so air packs are one of the most key important pieces of equipment you own, right, Paul? That and trucks are the most heavily regulated aspects of your operating equipment.
The performance requirements are minimum standards, right? At least once a year, you should pump your truck and make sure it passes its performance standards. At least once a year, you should check your SCBA. You can do it more, which is sort of where these are leading to.
And nowadays, of course, we're right into cleaning them properly. There was no proper method for cleaning them really before. I mean, we used to put them in a laundry tub and scrub them with soap and water and a brush, basically. But now they're actually selling. It's SCBA not a hose washer, but it's like a hose washer.
Yeah.
And you stick your pack in there, and it gives you a nice clean pack. And but the impact of all this, and like you were talking about European packs, sending them back. Maybe they have fewer fires, but I know in the last department that I was in, if we sent our packs out to be properly performance tested after every fire, we might not have any packs.
No, these packs, it was a city of 200,000, Karlsruhe, Germany, where the Metz factory is. They had it in-house. They had in-house SCBA trained people that could do a flow test. Flow testing in SCBA is not rocket science. Like you could probably, with luck, you could train me to do it.
Yeah.
You buy an expensive machine that has to be calibrated every year and all that kind of stuff, but the machine does the work. You basically hook it up and write down the results. They had it in the station. So the SCBAs came off the truck, went to the room to get cleaned and tested, and another bunch of SCBAs were hanging on a rack there. You may have had a few more SCBAs in service by the truck, and they threw a new one on the truck. So it's not.
Yeah, you anticipated where I was going with that. I was going to say that that's not something that you can stand. And it's the same as like having dual sets of bunker gear, right? So you've got to put the systems and the equipment in place in your station to be able to deal with that. Same thing with fit testing and all that other kind of stuff. You're going to have to internalize some of this stuff, or at least regionalize it to make it functionally effective.
There you go. Way to fund a firefighter is to have them trained to test SCBAs and be in the station all the time during the day and go to calls. Just like we talked about at the Fire Chiefs Conference, the way to fund a firefighter, a fire smart coordinator for your rural community, is to hire one full time, and he can go to calls as well, he or she. So, I mean, it's life safety. We have to focus on this stuff. Anyway, get off my soapbox.
No shortcuts.
Let's honor the sacrifice of these two brave firefighters by reviewing your fire department's response policies for fire operations in vacant or abandoned buildings. Also, visit vacant abandoned building properties in your first due local. Familiarize your members with the current conditions found in these occupancies, because unfortunately, vacant buildings are frequent flyers on the Emergency Traffic Podcast, and it's not needed.
What's the life safety risk in a vacant building usually?
The
A
firefighter.
firefighter. I know there could be a homeless person in there.
Yep,
That's possible.
You want to make sure they're not in there. That's good.
But in this particular incident, just to remind you, there was 2 fatalities and 1 near miss.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone, again for listening to another episode of the Emergency Traffic Podcast. We hope that you continue to find them informative and helpful. And of course, please give us a like, a thumbs up on your streaming platforms, and tell a friend. And let's be safe out there.
Be good.